From lifting bricks to leading teams. Discover how one man's determination and relentless drive transformed him from an ordinary laborer to a respected construction supervisor, proving that no dream is too big when you're willing to put in the work. Robbie woke up to the sound of his alarm blaring in the early morning hours, as he did every day. The sun hadn't yet risen, and the sky was still a deep shade of dark blue, dotted with stars. It was a familiar scene: his small, modest room, the worn-out bed, and the quiet hum of the city just beginning to stir. As he stretched and sat up, the weight of another long day on the construction site settled on his shoulders. The pain from yesterday's labor still lingered in his muscles, and he knew that another day of heavy lifting and hard work awaited him. But as he pulled himself out of bed and began his routine, there was something different about today. Something had shifted inside him. For years, Ravi had worked the same job, day in and day out. He had been just another laborer on the construction sites, carrying bricks, mixing cement, and following orders without question. It was a tough job, physically demanding and never-ending, but it had always been enough to survive. He had gotten used to the grueling work, the aches in his bones, and the constant feeling of exhaustion. His life felt like it was on an endless loop: wake up, work, sleep, repeat. There was no room for anything else. But as he stood in front of the mirror that morning, a sense of frustration washed over him. He was tired of this cycle. He was tired of living for the next paycheck, only to find himself back in the same spot the next week, still stuck in the same position. Ravi had dreams that seemed so far out of reach. He had always imagined that one day he would be able to rise above the life he had known, to be more than just a laborer. But for years, those dreams had been buried under the weight of reality. It felt like every step forward was followed by 2 steps back, and the more he tried to improve his situation, the more obstacles seemed to get in his way. But today felt different. Today, Ravi made a decision that would change the course of his life forever. He couldn't keep waiting for opportunities to fall into his lap. He couldn't wait for someone else to recognize his potential. He had to take control of his future. He had to prove to himself that he was capable of more than just manual labor. Ravi had realized something that he had been blind to for so long. His circumstances didn't have to define him. He could choose to be more. With a new sense of determination, he finished getting ready and left his small apartment. The streets were still quiet, but the sounds of life were slowly starting to fill the air. He walked briskly toward the construction site, his mind racing with thoughts of the future. He knew that he had to make a change, but he had no idea where to start. All he knew was that he couldn't keep living like this, stuck in the same rut. As he arrived at the construction site, Ravi joined the other laborers who were already hard at work. The familiar sounds of the site, the clang of metal, the rumble of machines, and the shouts of foremen surrounded him. But today, everything felt different. Ravi had always been just another worker blending into the background, doing his part and moving on. But today, he was more determined than ever to stand out. He wasn't going to let his role as a laborer define his worth. He wasn't going to settle for a life of hard work with no end in sight. Ravi started his day, as usual, lifting heavy loads and moving materials from one place to another. But in the back of his mind, he couldn't stop thinking about the changes he wanted to make. He began to look at the construction site in a different way. Instead of just doing what he was told, he started paying attention to the bigger picture, the design of the buildings, the materials being used, the flow of the work. He noticed the blueprint drawings that were posted on the walls and realized that there was so much more to construction than just physical labor. It was about planning, strategy, and attention to detail. As the day wore on, Ravi found himself watching the foremen and the engineers as they moved around the site, making decisions and giving instructions. He had always admired them, how they seemed to have all the answers, how they managed the site with ease and precision. It was a world he had never really understood, a world of planning and decision-making that seemed so far removed from the physical labor he had known for so long. But today, something inside him clicked. Maybe, just maybe, he could learn more about this side of the work. He realized that if he wanted to rise above his current role, he needed to understand more than just how to carry bricks. He needed to learn how to manage, how to plan, how to make the decisions that shape the outcome of a project. Ravi understood that his future wasn't going to be built on the strength of his muscles alone. It was going to take knowledge, skill, and a willingness to push beyond what was expected of him. And if he wanted to make that change, he had to start now. Ravi began to stay later than usual, helping with tasks that went beyond his typical duties. He asked the engineers questions, watched them as they read blueprints, and paid attention to the materials they selected for each part of the project. They looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and doubt, unsure of why a laborer would suddenly want to get involved in these more technical aspects of the job. But Ravi didn't care. He wasn't doing it for them. He was doing it for himself. He had made the decision that he wasn't going to be content with his current life. He wasn't going to be just another laborer who worked his body into the ground for a paycheck. He wanted to understand the bigger picture, to learn how to make the kind of decisions that would change the course of a construction project and his life. That evening, as Ravi walked home, exhausted from another day of labor and study, he felt a sense of purpose he had never experienced before. It wasn't just the physical work that had changed, it was his mindset. He was no longer just going through the motions. He was building a new future for himself, brick by brick. And no matter how difficult the road ahead might be, he knew that it was worth it. The next day, he approached the site manager, Mr. Mehra, who had been overseeing the project. Ravi had seen Mr. Mehra from a distance, watching him lead with confidence and authority. Ravi admired the man's knowledge and experience, and now he had a request to make. He wanted to learn. He wanted to move beyond being just a laborer and take on more responsibility. "Sir," Ravi began, his voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside him. "I want to learn more about the work here. I don't want to just carry bricks. I want to understand the planning and decision-making that goes into building a structure. I want to do more." Mr. Mehra looked at him, clearly surprised. "You're serious about this?" Ravi nodded. "Yes, sir. I want to prove that I can do more. I'm ready to learn." After a long pause, Mr. Mehra finally spoke. "All right, Ravi. I'll teach you. But understand, it won't be easy. It takes time and effort. But if you're willing to put in the work, I'll help you." Ravi's heart swelled with hope. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for. This was his chance to prove to himself that he was capable of more than just hard labor. And so, his journey of self-transformation began. From that day on, Ravi committed himself fully to learning and growing. He had taken the first step toward proving not just to others, but to himself, that he was capable of achieving greatness. The days passed, and Ravi's commitment to change grew stronger with each passing moment. What had begun as a vague desire to improve himself had slowly transformed into a relentless drive. The work on the construction site was hard as ever. Long hours, heavy lifting, and physical exhaustion. But Ravi's mind was elsewhere, constantly occupied with a new path he had decided to pursue. His body was sore from the physical labor, yet the fire in his heart burned brighter each day. He wasn't simply working anymore. He was working with purpose. He had a reason to push through the sweat, the tiredness, and the doubt. Every brick he carried, every load he lifted became a small step towards something bigger. The first few weeks were challenging. Ravi had spent years learning to be a laborer. His hands knew the feel of cement, the grip of tools, and the rhythm of manual work. But this new journey he had embarked on, learning the technical aspects of construction, was entirely foreign to him. His evenings were now filled with study. He pored over construction plans, studying blueprints late into the night. He learned about the different materials used in construction, the calculations behind structural integrity, and the details of project management. It was overwhelming at first, as he struggled to make sense of the numbers and the terms that were completely new to him. He often found himself staring at the pages, wondering if he was even capable of grasping it all. There were nights when the doubts crept in, when the weight of his ambition felt like too much to bear. But Ravi wasn't the kind of person who gave up easily. He had seen firsthand what hard work could accomplish. He knew that this was just another challenge, and like all challenges, it was something to be overcome, not avoided. Each time he felt overwhelmed, he reminded himself that the road to success wasn't easy, and no one achieved anything of value without struggle. Every time he failed, every time he got something wrong, he learned, and learning, he realized, was what would take him one step closer to his goal. His evenings spent studying weren't just about gaining technical knowledge. They were also about building confidence in himself. Robbie had spent so long doubting his ability to rise above his current position that he had almost convinced himself that his dreams were too big for someone like him. But now, every time he learned something new, he could feel his self-doubt slowly dissolving. He was beginning to see himself in a new light, as someone capable of more. The process wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but with each day, Robbie could feel himself becoming stronger, both in knowledge and in belief. On the construction site, things were changing too. Robbie had started to get noticed. It wasn't just that he was showing up early and staying late. It was the fact that he was showing initiative. His eyes were no longer just fixed on the physical work that needed to be done. He was now watching the engineers, asking questions, and trying to understand how things were done. One day, as Ravi was carrying a load of bricks, he noticed the project manager, Mr. Mehra, walking by. Ravi had been quietly observing how Mr. Mehra managed the workers, how he made decisions, and kept everything running smoothly. He knew that Mr. Mehra had years of experience under his belt, and Ravi knew that if he was ever going to climb the ladder, he needed to learn from someone like him. Mr. Mehra, Ravi called out, pausing in his work. Can I talk to you for a minute? Mr. Mehra turned around, a bit surprised by the request. What is it, Ravi? Ravi hesitated for a moment, gathering his thoughts. I want to learn more. I've been studying the plans, and I'm interested in how you make decisions on site. I want to understand the bigger picture of how everything comes together. Can you teach me? Mr. Mehra looked at Ravi thoughtfully. It wasn't every day that a laborer asked to learn about the management side of the work. He had seen many workers, but none of them had ever expressed the kind of initiative Ravi was showing. You're serious about this? Mr. Mehra asked. I am, Ravi replied. I want to prove to myself that I can do more. There was a long pause as Mr. Mehra considered Ravi's request. Finally, he nodded. All right, I'll start showing you the basics. It won't be easy, but if you're willing to put in the work, I'll help you. Ravi's heart soared. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for. He had been working tirelessly for months, but he hadn't expected someone to notice his efforts so soon. Ravi's gratitude was overwhelming, but he didn't let it stop him. He knew that getting this opportunity was just the first step. Now, he had to prove that he was worthy of it. The next day, Mr. Mehra took Ravi under his wing, showing him the different aspects of managing a construction project. Ravi learned about the importance of planning, of coordinating the workers and materials. He learned about the logistics of construction, about how to read blueprints and interpret the details that made a project come to life. Every day brought new lessons, new challenges. Ravi's mind was constantly engaged, absorbing as much information as he could. But it wasn't just the technical side of things that Ravi was learning. He was also learning about leadership. He was learning how to communicate with others, how to motivate a team, and how to handle the challenges that arose in the midst of a project. The more Ravi learned, the more he realized how much he had underestimated the complexity of the work. It wasn't just about lifting bricks or mixing cement. It was about making decisions that affected the entire outcome of a project. It was about understanding the bigger picture and being able to solve problems on the fly. Ravi's respect for the work grew, and so did his determination to prove that he was capable of handling it. Over time, Ravi started to take on more responsibility. He was given small tasks that involved managing different aspects of the project, like overseeing the delivery of materials or helping with the scheduling of workers. These tasks were new to him, and at first he found them intimidating. But with each task, he grew more confident. He learned how to approach problems methodically, how to prioritize tasks, and how to keep everything running smoothly. It wasn't always perfect. There were mistakes along the way, moments when things didn't go according to plan, but Ravi knew that failure was part of the process. It was how he learned. As the months went by, Ravi's reputation on the site started to change. He was no longer just a laborer who carried bricks. He was becoming a valuable part of the team, someone who was trusted. With more responsibility, his colleagues began to notice the shift in him, and some of them even started to ask him for advice. Ravi felt a sense of pride in those moments, but he also knew that he wasn't finished yet. He had only just begun to prove to himself that he was capable of more. One day, Mr. Mehra pulled Ravi aside after work. You're doing well, he said, his voice filled with approval. You've come a long way, Ravi. I think you're ready for something more. Ravi's heart raced as he listened to Mr. Mera's words. What do you mean? There's an opening for a site supervisor on a new project, Mr. Mera explained. I think you're ready to apply. It's going to be a big responsibility, but I believe you can handle it. Ravi was stunned. This was the opportunity he had been dreaming of. It was his chance to prove that all the hard work, all the sacrifice, had been worth it. But as he stood there listening to Mr. Mera, he realized something important. He wasn't just applying for a job. He was applying for the chance to prove to himself that he had what?